only place for everything Vikings. 6, 1, 2, Vikings.
Welcome back to 612 Vikings. I'm Dustin alongside Drew. Drew, how are we feeling today on this glorious Friday evening?
I'm doing good, halfway down with the off season, another half to go. So only a couple more months left. So OTAs and players coming in on a volunteer workout basis and get to see the new rookies and the Viking jerseys that are warm up jerseys. So it's exciting. And, we got JJ McCarthy kind of back out there throwing with the receivers once again after his injury. So things are starting to look up after if you want to call it bleak season, but not really bleak season, but bleak year one for JJ McCarthy. We'll say that. So, but yeah, it's definitely exciting time, especially after all the acquisitions and getting to see them in the Viking purple.
Yeah, that's for sure. I can't wait for training camp to come around. We've had our OTAs, that's just a little bit of football, but to actually get into pads, cracking of the pads, actual football and training camp, can't wait for that. But before we get to that, we have some breaking news from this morning. Me and Drew have both been hovering around our phones and computers the last, a couple months and weeks for this news to come out. And it's that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the Vikings general manager, got extended. We don't know the details quite yet, but hey, we got our GM and our head coach around for long term. Drew, how we feeling about good old Kwesi cooking back with the Vikings?
Yeah, I think there's some pros and cons, we'll say. I think a lot of pros is, his UDFAs, his free agencies have been all slam dunks. They've all been home runs, grand slams out of the park. So I think the only thing that really remains is we really want to see that class from last year play out, and then especially this year's class play out. So, last year they all of our first round picks ended up getting like a red shirt year, with McCarthy's injury, and then Dallas Turner kind of being behind a very, very talented edge roster over there. So, we'll wait and see how that works out. But, if JJ McCarthy's the next, franchise quarterback that the league's looking for, and we're all hoping him to be, this is going to be a very, very good value deal for Kwesi, it sounds like. So, and usually you want to pair up the years with the head coach. So I'm assuming whatever Kevin O'Connell got is what Kwesi got as well. So, I think that's just the thing that I was kind of looking for is, I want to see how this plays out in the next couple of years. So, and, in other news, we got Ryan Grigson and Demetrius Washington. One of our scouts got promoted to an assistant GM position as well. So some other guys, not just Kwesi, it's also some other guys getting some big news. And Dustin, we can kind of talk about the assistants getting the promotions.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that you want to tie together is the head coach and the GM. You don't want to go long term with only having one or the other. It's very smart to marry the two together, especially a good relationship that they both have in Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi. Whereas, you wouldn't do that with Mike Zimmer and Spielman because they both kind of hated each other, but that's besides the point. This I guess, quote unquote, couple likes each other. So they're married, I guess is the best way to put it, but it's kind of weird to put it that way. But Kwesi, I think he's done a really good job with his free agency class. Draft class, we got to kind of wait and see on. But just kind of looking back at this free agency class, I took a couple notes on this. The most notable ones. First year, Zadarius Smith, Shannon Sullivan, Harrison Phillips, Johnny Munt, Jordan Hicks. Those were some notable guys. 2023, Brandon Powell, Jonathan Bullard, Byron Murphy, which he got a long-term extension with the Vikings. Last year, Aaron Jones, Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, Blake Cashman, Sam Darnold, Shaquille Griffin, Grugier Hill, Stephon Gilmore. That's just to name a few of those guys. And that was just from last year. And then this year, we all know Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Jordan Mason in a trade, Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, and so on. So I think Kwesi has definitely, hit this out of the park with free agency classes. I kind of want to see what he does in the future and then what happens with J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner kind of what happens with their trajectories. We'll see what happens with JJ McCarthy, but Dallas Turner looks promising. JJ looks promising. So what's your take on, this free agency class that he's had the past couple years and the draft classes?
Yeah, so I think last year's draft class, or not draft class, but free agency class, I think it really sets up the Vikings for not only this year but their future as well, and puts them in a good situation, kind of cushions that quarterback room a little bit. And I really do think the big reason why the Vikings went 14-3 last year was because of that free agency class, because of guys like Cashman, who pretty much the only game he lost in the regular season was against the Lions, and he's only lost one regular season game in the last 2 years when he's on the field. So his defensive impact is definitely there. And when the Vikings were, slipping up on some games against Detroit and LA earlier in that season, Blake Cashman was out. So that leadership really, you could tell that it's important on that defense. He's the quarterback of that defense. He's the guy that makes everything go. So I think with that signing alone, puts that linebacker room in what looked like a very bleak linebacker room to a very, very strong linebacker room for the next few years. And then you get Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard, basically a 2-for-1 for Danielle Hunter, same price tag that Danielle got in Houston. And you got two really, really solid pieces. One, I feel like they're kind of they complement each other so well, because I feel like Grenard's that more true pass rushing edge rusher that you really look for, and he really took that next step from last year. But for this year with Van Ginkel, he's a guy that can play in coverage, which is something we really haven't had, and Danielle Hunter really struggled in when he was with the Vikings as well. When he just sticks his paw out there and he gets a pick six twice. So could have been a couple more times. He very well could have had 4 or 5 touchdowns because of some dropped interceptions, which I know is going to be very hard to do. But the fact that we've seen it twice, it's almost become like an expectation for the Vikings and Van Ginkel. Yeah, they're there. It shows us that it's capable of doing it, and it's not something that's surprising either, because he was doing it in Miami a couple years ago. He did it against Sam Howell. He was now his teammate. So ironically, so things kind of come in full circle there. But with Van Ginkel, I feel like they kind of Van Ginkel and Grenard really complement each other really well in that aspect. And then Dallas Turner, he's like the real that blur off the edge, kind of what Danielle Hunter brought as well. So I feel like each individual edge has its own skill set that's very unique, and I feel like they all work together and mesh to be a really good edge room instead of just having Danielle Hunter alone. So I think those signings alone, just on the defensive side, was really, really a big catalyst for the reason why they went 14-3 last year.
Yeah, and one last look throughout these free agency classes too. The guys that got long-term deals were out of the 2022 class, Harrison Phillips, and I think he might be around for a couple more years too with the Minnesota Vikings. Byron Murphy from 2023. 2024, you have a lot of great guys in there. Aaron Jones kind of got another deal. Grenard is going to be here long-term, I think. Andrew Van Ginkel got a deal. Blake Cashman, I think, will be here for a while. So 2025, a lot of, I don't want to say rotational guys, but guys that will make an immediate impact, but, are going to stick around for a year or two. And those are guys that you want to fill positions with in the draft, which kind of leads us to the whole draft class with Kwesi, where 2022 kind of got off on a bad foot. Whatever way you want to put it, just wasn't great, But after that, I think his draft classes have been pretty average or above average, I would say. So we got to see what that 2024 draft class looks like within the next year or two. I think that's a good assessment to have. But to replace those guys that are a lot older, like a Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, in the trenches, that's where you got to start, is the draft classes, and you got to hit in those too. So I don't think that the Wolves would extend Kwesi if they didn't believe in his drafting abilities, because you can't just build a team on free agents. You got to build for the future. So I don't know. That's my kind of take on the draft classes. But what's your take on the recent draft classes too?
Yeah, like I said earlier, 2022 wasn't his best class, but most general managers, their rookie season as a GM don't explode with, all these great players out of the gate. Usually it takes some time because the staff is starting to mesh together. Usually GMs will have a brand new staff, whole new overlook. So you're basically starting from scratch, and you don't have as much research and development because everything's kind of fast tracked into a few months versus once you've been there for 2, 3, 4 years, you can sit down with them for the entirety of the year, break things down over time, and really slow that down. So I think that's a big reason why you see a lot of GMs really struggle their first year. But there are going to be some rookie GMs that will draft some players, and sometimes just pure luck. Just guys fall into their laps, or maybe they make something happen, like how Jacksonville did by getting Travis Hunter. So sometimes you got to make your own magic that way. But usually most GMs don't do that well their first year. You really start to see them develop over time, similar to like a quarterback for an offense as well. So, but like you said, I think a lot of it really goes into what these next couple draft classes are going to be like, because I don't know if it's ridiculous to say, but if Dallas Turner's a hit off the edge and he's your edge of the future, and JJ McCarthy's the franchise quarterback and Donovan Jackson's a hit, and you hit on your next 3 first-round picks, I think it's a conversation to be had that Kwesi could be the best general manager in football if all this goes right and all goes to plan, because you've secured the 2 most important positions that are the 2 highest paid positions in football, with your edge and quarterback being on rookie deals on year 2 of those deals, by the way. And then you got your guard to really solidify that offensive line as well. And pretty much you threw money at the problem. And it looks like if everything goes right there, and we tend to see Kwesi's free agency classes usually hit. And if that's, a repeat of last year, you really have a Super Bowl contender really lined up if everything goes right. And I think that's why a lot of people are excited, and a lot of, your national media members like Dan Orlovsky or Mina Kimes are really getting really excited about this JJ McCarthy thing, because I don't know if there's been a rookie quarterback that's been in a better situation. Maybe Patrick Mahomes is probably the one that really comes to mind, but I mean, maybe Andrew Luck. There's only been a few guys that have had better situations than the Vikings have, and proven situations that the Vikings have had compared to some other rookie quarterbacks that have come into the league.
Right. You got to give the flowers to, or the credit at least, to Kwesi for building this car for JJ McCarthy to succeed. He's not putting him in a bad position where, okay, go do your thing, try to make it work. You have an offensive line, a dominant offensive line for the Minnesota Vikings, which we haven't seen an offensive line like this since, 2009 maybe? But, you're also looking at the weapons. Justin Jefferson, the best wide receiver in the league. A really good wide receiver too, Jordan Addison. A reliable tight end, TJ Hawkinson. A great run game, a great duo run game, I guess, with Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. So this car is built for JJ McCarthy, and it's going to be hard to not succeed in this offense. Josh Dobbs is a great example. We'll always bring this up, where he took, 2.5 games to be great for the Vikings and win those games, and just play on the fly. So it'll be really interesting to see how well JJ McCarthy plays. He doesn't have to be a Patrick Mahomes, a Joe Burrow his first year. Just be a game manager and then build off of that. So like I said, Kwesi is doing a phenomenal job building this car for JJ McCarthy, and really any player to succeed. He's building a great culture. KOC's building a great culture. So I really like to see this by Kwesi and the whole Vikings organization. So I don't know. It'll be really fun to see for sure.
Yeah, like I said, the JJ thing is definitely a big one. But, like we mentioned earlier, we have some other news too. We had some assistants or, lower level front office members get that promotion. And it was in Ryan Grigson, former general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, who's been a really big mentor in Kwesi on just kind of knowing what the day-to-day operations of what the general managing field really looks like, considering that he's done that. Fortunately didn't have the best success in Indianapolis, but just more of that day-to-day operations on how to do this, on how to do this and how to do that. So I think having that vet, guy that's been around a bunch of different front offices is definitely really critical, and a guy who was really a big reason why the Vikings signed Sam Darnold. And I know a lot of people like to knock down on Grigson because of his time in Indianapolis, and it's kind of seems like he's the one to point the finger at. But you don't get the 14-3 season without Ryan Grigson there as well. So because without Grigson, there's no Sam Darnold, in 2024. So, and then our other one we mentioned earlier was Demetrius Washington. But just some research that we've done on him. So he seems to be kind of the younger version of Kwesi. He's an analytics guy. He's a Missouri graduate when he got where he got his master's from. Has been with Kwesi since his San Francisco and Cleveland days. So he's very much an analytic nerd, if you would say. So he seems to be the interesting prospect if the NFL wants to go in that direction of analytics and the Moneyball approach. And like I said, a lot of it's going to depend on how 24 and the 25 draft classes work out. And if these draft classes work out, we might be looking at a potential third-round pick compensations coming in for Demetrius Washington in a general managing role because he's a younger guy and he's been around success at the Minnesota Vikings level. So if we can find that success, he might be looking at a new job elsewhere, which will help the Vikings get some comp picks out there.
All right, Drew, I do want to ask you, too, about Kwesi before we turn the page here. Are the Vikings the closest thing in the NFL right now to being a Moneyball-type team? Because of Kwesi's background, because of Kwesi's operations, are the Vikings the closest thing to like the movie Moneyball?
I would have to say yes. There's some things that we don't know yet in terms of their scouting and their approach to players and free agency. But I think the Moneyball aspect, more of getting the best bang for your buck and kind of finding those undervalued guys. I think Isaiah Rodgers could be a really interesting player to watch in 2025, a guy who really wasn't paid all that much. But he's a wild card sleeper candidate if he ends up being like a CB1 kind of player and breaks out. I think that could be an interesting approach where it's that the answer would be yes. The Vikings know something that other teams don't know, but the one that has been proven already that has worked has been Andrew Van Ginkel, because I think we only signed him for $20 million for 2 years. So you got a second team all pro for nickels and dimes, in your bargain bin. So the fact that you can find those players, it shows their pro scouting department knows something that others don't. And I think maybe a lot of it kind of helped with Brian Flores and knowing that scheme from the past too. But it didn't really matter for that as much, because we saw with other players, like we mentioned with Blake Cashman, and we saw in Jonathan Grenard and Stephon Gilmore, maybe didn't have the defensive player of the year, Stephon Gilmore, but he wasn't a liability at 33, 34 years old going against wide receiver ones consistently. So, and I think you really saw Cam Bynum really break out into that starting caliber, Pro Bowl caliber free safety for the Vikings. And, there was some, I want to say struggles, but, I think year two, there was some doubt, let's face it. Like, the Vikings drafted Lewis Cine, and not that they didn't believe in Cam Bynum, but the thought was Lewis Cine would be their free safety opposite of Harrison Smith because he was drafted in the first round. So the belief wasn't really there from the start as soon as Kwesi got in there, but he beat out Lewis Cine, got the starting job, and now he's got a big payday with the Colts. So, I think some things have gone right. I think the finding of the coaches and your pro scouting department, and potentially even your, maybe we'll see with our rookie drafts, with guys like JJ McCarthy, where a lot of people don't really believe in JJ McCarthy, especially going into the draft. People are calling him the handoff merchant. They're calling him, some people are saying he's a cheater because of the whole Connor Stallions thing. So I think there's there could be some truth to that, but I think we kind of want to wait and see how this all plays out, because there hasn't really been a team that has adapted that Moneyball mantra to assessing their team. Because maybe the Browns with Andrew Berry because they hired Dee Podesta, but there hasn't been a team that has hired somebody from Cleveland yet to general manage their team and make them really, really good for the next couple of years or potentially for decades. So I think that I would have to say yes, but a little bit of a yes, but wait and see a little bit at the same time.
Yeah, I think they're probably the closest thing right now. Maybe not exactly a full Moneyball team. Look at Sam Darnold from last year. You get a guy that's productive, and then you say, okay, we don't need to pay you. You can go somewhere else. We don't necessarily need you on our team. We can move on. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Throughout the past couple of years, I guess you could have a strong argument towards it, but I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, too, because I didn't even mention that. But, you look at Sam Darnold, the whole Ryan Grigson thing and Kwesi bringing him in, the writing I thought was on the wall. Like I mean, I called it, and we were on the show saying I wouldn't sleep on Sam Darnold. Like he had the potential to be a good quarterback, especially going with the Vikings and the system that's going to be around him, and really nerfed in to really reinforce that confidence once again. I mean, you look at his last time as a full-time starter, as a starting quarterback in the league. He was on the Carolina Panthers. They had benched Baker Mayfield. Matt Rule is, basically, I think he was fired. He was on his way out, kind of in that Carolina role there. There was no Christian McCaffrey either to really take the pressure off. So they pretty much said, just go out there and just do whatever you can. He almost put the team on his back and took that Carolina Panthers team to the playoffs. And, it did help that he had a target in DJ Moore. But let's face it, like DJ Moore is not a Justin Jefferson, a CeeDee Lamb, or A.J. Brown caliber of receiver. He's a very solid receiver, but good enough to, to have a respectable player around you.
Reliable.
But the fact that they went in there, they were basically dead last in that division. They put in Sam Darnold, puts the team on his back, and won a bunch of games in a row, and they were a game-winning drive away from beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to make the playoffs. So I thought the writing was on the wall, and the stats showed that as well with his last year as a starter. And I got to give credit to Kwesi and Ryan Grigson on bringing him in, because that was just a masterful job. And luckily for us, we've been kind of the kings of finding those retread quarterbacks and then making them nice and shiny and polished and good to go for at least one season with, guys like Jeff George and Randall Cunningham, Brett Favre, Case Keenum, and Sam Bradford. And, now we got Sam Darnold. So, I mean, that's 6 guys over the last 25 seasons. So, I got to give credit to where it's due, because, I mean, it's a big reason why I feel like they ended up getting this extension.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not just the past couple of years that the Vikings have rebuilt these quarterbacks. It's been the last, quarter century that the Vikings have done this. So, Drew, is there any other last notes that you want to add about Kwesi before we turn the page? Because I want to talk about last night's Unreal event for softball, just for a minute or two.
No, yeah, I think we kind of hit everything, so we can kind of talk about. That was at the Thielen softball game, I believe, over there, and
it was.
Yeah, we could talk about that a little bit.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that will do it for Kwesi's little segment here. All 22 full minutes of that. So yeah, Kwesi extended, awesome. He's with KOC for the what do I want to say? Near future. So. With that said, last night, the Minnesota Vikings held their annual charity softball game. The Thielen Foundation partners with Unreal, popular golf athletic clothing brand. And I attended that last night. Got a couple clips for you guys I want to show with you. So if you guys are watching on YouTube, you guys will see this. So you can see Justin Jefferson warming up. I believe this is his first or second time out there at CHS Field. And let me tell you this. This dude can play wide receiver for the Vikings and probably play for the Minnesota Twins, because he was hitting home runs all night. Maybe not all night, but at least this one here. You can see him running the bases, and then once he gets to third base, you can see Ivan Pace almost tripping him. I don't know why he would do that, but he had to jump over him like that. So, yeah, it is a really cool event. JJ McCarthy was also there. You can see JJ grittying all the way to home plate. But Eric Wilson hit a home run as well. Welcome back, Eric Wilson, to the Vikings. Kind of going to the song of Whoop That Ass, I think it's called. So, I don't know, it was a really fun event. Those of you that have not gone to one of those, make sure you guys try to go to one of those, especially next year. We did get a little rain delay, which was unfortunate, but you guys can see that the guys have lots of fun there. It's a really fun event. So I get a lot of videos on Twitter as well. You guys can follow along there. So I don't know, really fun event. Make sure you guys get tickets to that fairly cheap as well. So Lane Glodick, Strictly Football, was there getting content. So yeah. I don't know. It was a cool event.
It's all for a good cause. All for a good cause, too, because I believe that money goes to charity, too. So
it does.
It's all for a good cause. So
yeah, Thielen's son was there, too, through the first pitch. That was
he did? That's pretty cool,
yeah. So
awesome.
With that said, I think that is pretty much it for the past week or so. You had OTAs, nothing really special going on there. Kwesi extended, that softball game from last night. So, Drew, what do we have next on this NFL calendar, at least for the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah, I think your next part of your schedule is most likely going to be training camp, and I mean, I guess you could have your you also have your June 1st, the start of the new league year. So may have some news. Ben Gessling saying
Jalen Ramsey.
Yeah, I know Ben Gessling's says don't rule out Jalen Ramsey, but I think a good way for
Would you want Jalen Ramsey?
I do, but I don't want to trade for him. I would want to try to snag him if the Dolphins were to cut him. And I think that's a good possibility of that happening because the way that his contract is set up, I think there's like 3 more years left on the deal, but like that very last year, you have to pay him $35 million. And by that time, he'll be 33 years old. So I don't really see the path for him. And I think the Dolphins are going to have to eat that money so they'll post June 1st him, but they might try to, I think the only way they were able to save money is to post June 1 trade him. So I think if they do, they're going to have to release him. I think that's the only way I could see Minnesota potentially being in play for him. And then really just backloading that contract, kind of basically Shohei Ohtani that contract and just make a lot of his money, maybe give him a 3-year deal, but give him all that money in year 3 and you can release him there. So because we got some, not that we're strapped for cash, but, we want to try to watch our dollars just because we want to, make sure we can elevate and de-elevate guys and players, and you don't want to have to
be frugal with our money.
Yeah, pretty much, yes. Because next year we I think we're over the cap projected, so and that's going to be something that we'll talk about when that time comes on players who might come and go for that. But I think I think the only way you take Jalen Ramsey is if the Dolphins cut him, because then you don't have to give up any picks and you don't have to eat that contract for the future as well, and really put yourself in the hole for next year.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, there you guys have it for this episode. Kwesi talk and upcoming events. Most likely training camp. That is end of July. Don't worry, guys. We will not be gone until training camp. We'll have some talkers for you. At least once a week, we'll try to do that. So with that said, make sure you guys leave a like on this episode. Follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. I believe we got 10 followers on Spotify. So hey, what a milestone, guys! Awesome. No, I actually do mean that, guys. Thank you for following.
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah, I think we're slowly getting there, slowly but surely. After about a year or so, kind of talking here and there, and I think we'll put more work out when the season comes, and we'll start to see this grow even more. So.
Oh yeah. Hey, once training camp comes around, I'll get the content on 612, and we'll get the ball rolling. We'll get it rolling.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you guys in the next episode. Skol Vike.